Good evening, everybody. Um, my name is Mike Seymour. I'm athletic director for Great Valley School District, and we're hoping tonight to give all the parents of the middle school student athletes some information that they might, deem as important for them. I have invited all of our middle school and high school coaches to be a part of it, but we have at least our high school coaches this spring. They're all getting ready for the postseason and finishing up their season. They might not have the opportunity to be here. What I am going to do is I have a PowerPoint that I'll go through that'll answer what I'm hoping a majority of your questions. We are going to use the chat feature, and that'll give an opportunity for the coaches that are on board. They might be able to answer the questions as they go if I don't get to them. And at the end, you'll have a chance to ask some questions, and I'll answer them. And if we don't get to your question and they're in the chat, I will make sure we have a copy of it, and I will get those answers and put them on both the high school and the middle school websites. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen and get the PowerPoint going. Okay, I hope everybody can see that okay. All right, so tonight, as I said, is for the Great Valley Middle School Athletics Information Night. We're hoping to give everybody the information that they're looking for, and if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. And before I get going on my part, I'd like to welcome Dr. Souders, who's our principal, and let him do a couple opening thoughts.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to work with Mr. Seymour over the past year to get our middle school program, through the pandemic, and we really are excited to see what we'll be able to accomplish when we return to what we believe will be a normal athletic season here in the fall of 2021. But as always, as we have learned throughout the pandemic, we do not take anything for granted, and we just want to make sure that we are being as transparent in our process. Both Mr. Seymour and myself are always available for any questions that you may have about our athletic program and how to support your child in becoming an active participant in our program that we offer at the middle school in 7th and 8th grade. So Mike, thank you so much for all you do to oversee our programs both at the middle school and the high school. And at this point, I'm going to hand it back over to you, and I'll keep monitoring the participants who are joining us.
Great, thank you. And again, this goes for everybody. If you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Probably the easiest way is to get me through email. So if you have any questions that come up tonight or in the next couple of weeks or in the summer, don't hesitate to reach out. So here are some of the things that we are hoping to get through tonight, just so that you have some basic ideas. So what's the PIAA web updates like? What are the sports offered at the middle school and at the high school? I will share with you all the high school head coaching contact information. So if you have questions about any of the levels, we sort of see them as our 7th to 12th grade head of our program. So that would be a great person to reach out to if you haven't done so already. There are some different steps that you need to know in order to sign up. What will you need in order to be able to play? And then I have a slide say I still don't get it, where we go back and I go over some of the things that are the most important things. So signups for a second sport is a little bit different. I'll touch base on that. I do have one of our practices will begin this fall. Some of our basic, questions that you might have, some facts that you might want to know about, how Great Valley Athletics and within our league, how they operate, what the middle school and high school communications are like, and then I'll have an opportunity for anybody to ask questions if you have them tonight. Okay. So Great Valley Middle School and Great Valley High School are also part of the Chestnut League. And for the high school level, that involves 13 schools. We are in the American division, and the bigger schools happen to be the national division. The middle school doesn't really work that way. We go more about geographics because of transportation, but they go from Oxford to, Downtown Coatesville to Unionville, the Westchester schools, Kennett, and those are some of the main schools that we go against. And we are also governed by the PIAA, and so all the rules that we need to follow are based on PIAA rules. One, for instance, that you can't be a sixth grader, even if you're the most amazing athlete, that we have. You can't play seventh grade sports, or it would cost you your eligibility. So those are just some of the things, some basic things for you to know as we go through there. So up here, I have listed the seventh and eighth grade athletics that we have. So in the fall, we have boys cross country, girls soccer, cheerleading, field hockey, football, girls cross country, girls soccer, and volleyball. And as Dr. Souders alluded earlier, we're hoping we're going to have as close to a normal year as we can. We don't really know what the fall is going to look like. Certainly this year was very, very different than any year that any of us had ever experienced before. So we're hoping it's going to be close. We do follow the Chester County Health Department guidelines first and foremost, but we also have the state of Pennsylvania and the CDC are all places that we get some of our guidance from. So those are some of the sports that if you are interested in being involved here at school that are offered in the fall. The winter we have boys and girls basketball, cheerleading again, and wrestling. And then this spring we just finished up with baseball, boys and girls lacrosse, boys and girls track, and then softball. So those are the actual sports that we have here at the middle school. High school is very similar. Sorry, there we go. Oops. There it is. Sorry. High school is a little bit different. So all the sports are the same, but we also, in addition to that, have boys and girls golf in the fall. And most of the others are all the same. We do have JV and varsity football, JV and varsity field hockey, boys and girls cross country, JV and varsity, soccer programs, girls tennis. But really the big ones for the fall that are slightly different, we have girls tennis and the boys and girls golf. In the winter, we also, in addition to those sports that we offer in the middle school, we offer boys and girls indoor track and field. We also have boys and girls swimming. We have in the past had diving. The pool that we typically train in does not have a diving well. And so there are some things that we can do to try to help out those athletes who do want to participate in diving to be a part of the team. But that's something we can deal with on an individual basis if you have an interest for that. And then the spring, pretty much the same as the high school, with one exception that we also have boys tennis. But those are some of the basic sports that we have there if you have any interest in those. All right. So sorry, my mouse is touchy here. These are all the contacts that we have. Right now, we did just post the head cheerleading position for the high school. And so that one, we are accepting applications for it. But if there is a sport that you see on the screen that in particular is an interest for your child, that would be a great spot to start off with. So reaching out to them via email, and if for some reason you don't get that contact, just let me know, and then I can try to get some of that information, whatever you're looking for. So these are our fall sports. For the spring sport, the winter sports, you can see where those contacts, and again, the same cheerleading coach that would be in the fall will be the same one we'll have in the winter. We have had cheerleading for years and years, so we anticipate having not only basically in the fall, it's cheerleading for the football games, and in the winter, not only they cheer for wrestling and basketball, but they also get into their competition part of the cheerleading year. And then finally here in the spring, we have all of our contacts that we have here. Again, through baseball, lacrosse, softball, tennis, track and field. All right, so those would be a great spot to start if you wanted to communication with a high school head coach. Here is the way our middle school coaching staff is set up. So you can see there are a lot of people, a lot of moving parts. If you go to the Great Valley Middle School athletics website, which is the spot down at the bottom of the page here, all the links, you can get their contact information that way. Um, there's always all kinds of information, whether you're going to the high school or going to middle school. So if you're a parent of a sixth grader that's going to go out for seventh grade for the first time, or an eighth grader moving up to the high school, both the high school and middle school athletic pages have all that contact information for you if you want to reach out to a particular coach. Okay. This PowerPoint, by the way, will be available at the on both the middle school and high school athletics pages. And when you see the links, they will be live links. And when you click the buttons, like you can see the button there, it will take you to the Great Valley High School activities. So we have two club sports that don't fall under athletics. They actually fall under student activities, but they are athletic. They are things that are certainly considered sports in other venues. So the two contacts for the high school sports clubs are, John Brewer, you can see for crew there. That does go from 8th to 12th grade. And then we have, you can see Dave's email for the ice hockey program that you can check there as well. I know Great Valley Middle School through their clubs also has the mountain biking club. That would be something if one of your children was interested in, but you can go to the websites to get that contact information. Okay. So last year, this time, not only were we doing some of these Zooms for the first time, we introduced a program that's called Form Relief. So Great Valley School District has hired Form Relief to be the one that collects our all of our medical forms that we need, that the students need in order to participate in athletics. So what would happen would be, if this was your first year, you would go onto Form Relief, and you can click either of those two buttons if you're using the PowerPoint at a later time, or you can just type in Form Relief, and it would ask you what school do you want to go to. If you're going to be a middle school, if your child's going to be a middle school athlete, make sure you click middle school, not high school. But you would go there, you would create a family account where any of your children could use that account, and all the background information will stay consistent, meaning you should be able to use it from year to year. So if you did that this year with one of your children and you remember your logon information, you can go there and all the basic information will be in place already. If you happen to be somebody who wants to change something, you can also change it at that time. One of the main reasons we really liked working with Form Relief was that it is FERPA and HIPAA compliant. So for those people who want to, and you probably should, to protect your your background, your medical information. This is a company that follows all those guidelines that are required. So one of the things that to know that this is something that's confusing for some people, that even though all your basic background, so those of you who have older kids, when you've gone through all those papers, it ends up being 9 pages of things. All that stuff, with one exception, is going to be done online. The one exception is that you still need to get a physician or a doctor to complete the physical form, and you would download that onto your Form Relief account. So all of those forms or the physicals need to be done on June 1st or after that. If you are somebody that has recently gotten a physical, one of the things that you might do would be go to your doctor and ask if they can date it after the first, and most doctors are willing to do that. The other thing that you could do would be go to a Minute Clinic or something like that to get another physical. I know, at least with my medical plan, like my kids are allowed to get 1 physical per year, and you could get a physical for your 5-year-old, not knowing you were going to mess up the cycle of when you could get that to compete athletically for school. So that can be a complication. Once you have that form, which is Form 6, Section 6, you can either take a picture of that with your phone, or you can scan it yourself. And then right in between the medical portion of Form Relief and when you put in your emergency contacts, there's a download spot, and you download it, and then you are good to go. So those are some of the things that need to be done, and you can see it's sort of listed here. 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2 are pages 1 through 5, all done on Form Relief. Page 6 is something that you would download yourself, where you, as I said already, take a picture with your phone, or you can scan it on, using a scanner. That's something that you need to get, and that would be your physical. Number 4 is if you were playing a second sport. If you were playing a second sport, you do not have to get a second physical. What I mean by that, if you play, let's say, soccer in the fall and you were going out for wrestling in the winter, you would not have to get another physical. You would just go in there and basically sign off that your health continued from the first season to the second season, and that can be done online as well. There are some other waivers that are there as well. One is for the recertification form. So that's section 8. That would be if you ended, let's say, soccer and you were injured at the end, you need a doctor to clear you. So we would need confirmation that that had happened. Impact testing. Our hope for next year for the first time is to do impact testing for all contact sports at the middle school as well as the high school. And for those of you who aren't familiar with impact testing, Impact is a company, and it basically tests your reaction time to answering questions, your cognitive reaction time. And it is a measure that is used to compare it if you happen to get a concussion. It doesn't do you any good to get impact tested for the first time after a concussion. You want to get it beforehand. So our hope is to have that in place for this year as well, but all the waivers are there. And there are a whole host of other things that need to be signed. And Keith Johnson, who is the assistant AD and also the athletic trainer at the high school, and I've been working with Form Relief to minimize the number of forms that actually need to be signed on your computer. We're hoping to minimize that if we can, but I know it's a bunch, but once you do it once, it is done. And you can see at the top, the cost for all seasons is $95. And that's pretty much it for Form Relief. So this is just showing you some of the things that you might need to know. So it needs to be after June 1st, as I said. All these can be seen on the athletic pages. There's actually a video that we created that's a step-by-step walkthrough process of filling out Form Relief. On the side of the screen right there is a sample of what the Section 6 form looks like that you would bring to your doctors. Some doctors have them there, but the best bet would be to download that and to print that out to bring that with you. And that's what we have for Form Relief. Okay. I'm not going to play it right here, but the registration video that's on the
So in order to register for fall sports, you must go to formrelief.com.
So you can see it's going through the whole process of them taking it through. So I'm just going to skip that page, but that was going through right there, was going to show you step by step what you need to do. Okay. So this is usually the big question, especially for incoming 9th graders or incoming 7th graders. So in the fall, when do middle school practices begin? So middle school practices do begin the first week of school. That includes football. However, middle school football this coming year will start on August 23rd for heat acclimation. And what that basically is it's something that's required by the state of Pennsylvania, where the football players do not have all their equipment on. They basically go through some light calisthenics and they get used to the heat. As we know, August can be a really hot time, and that will happen that week. So everybody would want to you got to have all your forms in order to be able to participate in that. All the other sports will start on that next Monday, which is the 30th, and football will actually start regular practices on the 30th as well. High school is a little bit different. High school, all practices for the sports is August 16th, and just like middle school football, high school football has to start with, it's not really a practice, it's heat acclimation, and that would start August 9th. So if you're going to the high school, my suggestion to you would be to reach out to the high school coach just to make sure you have all the information so that you're ready to go. Certainly the winter and spring is a little bit different because you'll be in school, we're hoping, and you'll be able to, contact those coaches, and they'll have, announcements on and so on. But right now, if all goes the way we hope it's going to go, November 19th for both middle school and high school will be the start for the winter season, and March 7th for the spring season. So that just gives you a little bit of idea. Sometimes some of the kids who are playing a fall sport for the high school the first time don't necessarily realize that practices do start, as early as you can see is the 9th of August, if you were going to play football. All right. Okay. So some basic facts. I did touch base on some of these. Each sport is $95 per season. Checks should be made out to Great Valley School District, and they should be turned into the main office after the tryouts, but before the games or scrimmages begin. So if you're worried about if you're playing a sport where there are cuts, and some of our sports have to cut just by basic numbers. If there isn't a cut, you can certainly pay that earlier. Pay schools is another way that you can do it right online. And Mr. Johnson and I have been looking into ways that we can somehow tie that into Form Leaf to have it like a one-stop shopping type of experience. We haven't worked that out, but that is another way that you can pay the activity fee. Form Leaf is also available in 108 different languages if that's something that you need access to. And middle school athletic practices and competitions typically are only on school days. This year was kind of crazy trying to figure it out with an asynchronous day and when we have a hybrid days and so on. So if we're back 5 days a week, that'll be relatively easy. There are a few rare occasions for wrestling, for instance, that there might be a tournament on the weekends, but middle school is usually Monday through Friday, whereas high school athletics are typically 6 days a week and maybe even over holidays and so on. So that's why it's really important when you and your family are starting to make plans and so on, if they're playing a fall sport, that you know when those holidays are and what the practice expectations would be. Over winter, if we start on a regular time, like on the 19th, as the plan is, it would have Thanksgiving and winter break over that same amount of time. And there might be some expectations for you to be there depending on what sport you're doing. Okay. I know I touched base or alluded to this already. Some sports do have cuts. The number of coaches, the number of students that are interested in playing, the number of uniforms that are available, all factors taken into consideration. We do the best we can to have as many kids active as possible. And this year, I know at least at the middle school level, we didn't have any cuts. In the high school, we didn't have many cuts as well. It all depends on how many kids are going to come out next year. This is a really important one if you are going to have a middle school athlete next year, and that's the pickup times. There are no late buses. Athletes must be picked up immediately after practice and or the games have been completed. So, if you're not there watching the game, we're hoping that we're going to be allowed to have all of our spectators that we want next year. But after practices, the practice time is much more important for the middle schoolers to make sure they're picked up on time, because the expectation is the coaches wait around until all the kids have been picked up. The high school, we do not have those same expectations because the kids are a little bit older. All game schedules can be found on Digital Sports. I know this year for the middle school, we didn't really use Digital Sports. In fact, we brought the link off, but we weren't doing that. Digital Sports is what the athletic directors use to post their games. Other schools use it as well. So if there's an adjustment for an away game, we would see it through that as well. So that was probably the best spot for you to go to see where those games will be. I will be honest, probably in the next couple weeks, the high school should be up to date. If we, with the middle school, we still need to see where we are. But at some point, hopefully soon, we'll have those middle school schedules up. And the plan is, the hope is to be very similar like we were, not this year, but the year before, where we're having a full schedule and so on. Okay. So in the chat, I'm just noticing a couple questions here, and it might be a good time for me to address them. So the schedules will come out for fall sports. Again, the Digital Sports is somewhat up to date when it comes to our league schedules for the high school. Middle school, they are not. We need to have conversations to make sure that we're going back where we were. If you had a child that was involved in the spring athletics for the middle school, we were in a pod with the Westchester area schools. Normally we play 10, 11, 12, 13 different schools in our games. And our hope is that we're getting back to something similar to that, where we are competing twice a week, at least for most sports. So the high school, as it says up there, are sometimes middle school are canceled due to the rain. We try to get out there as much as we can. High school athletics, for the most part, unless we have to, we typically do not. That might be a little bit different for a sport such as golf, where the course is not letting us out, or in tennis, where the surface is slippery. But many of our teams try to practice whenever they can. So whether it's cold, whether it's rainy, there is a good opportunity that we will be outside. One of the questions was asked is when is a typical pickup time for middle school sports? Each team will be slightly different. 4:45 is a very common time. 5 o'clock is sometimes there. Sometimes coaches build in time for cleanup. Sometimes coaches have it goes to, let's say, 5 o'clock, so pickup is 5:15. Um, all that information be coming directly from the coaches of those particular programs, but 4:45 to 5:15, somewhere in that ballpark. And each I don't want to speak for each individual coach, but they will let that information know for you. The question came up of, are there tryouts for the high school? There have been tryouts in the past where, I'm sorry, I didn't mention for cheerleading specifically in the high school. Typically there are tryouts, and sometimes it's, what position are you going to be in? Are you going to be a JV cheerleader? Are you going to be a high school, varsity cheerleader? We have not had to make any cuts in the last several years for high school cheerleading. And this year we didn't have very high numbers for our cheerleading program at the middle school, so I'm not anticipating any cuts, but there is the possibility we would have to have some. And again, all that information will be more forthcoming once we hire a new cheerleading coach that can answer that. So one of the questions that came up in the chat that I wanted to answer is, if you had a physical in May, do you need to get another one in June? And the answer is yes. Now, before you try to sign up for another physical, most of the time, because of the timetable, even if your physician says, or a pediatrician says, no, it's okay, you can do it, it's the PIAA that needs that date, needs to be June 1st or later. So most of the time what happens, I know it's happened in my family, you had to go back to the doctor and say, this is the date that we need, and that they've been willing to do that. I know that does complicate some for some places. It's not an arbitrary number. It's not really a number that we picked, meaning the June 1st. But if you need any help sort of navigating that, please reach out to me, send me an email, and then I'll give you a call and I can deal with it for that. Great question that came up in the chat was, how long is the fall season? We talked about how we start the season in mid-August. Typically, most of the regular season is done by the end of October. That does not necessarily include any postseason competitions that we have. So, if you happen to be on a varsity team that's really successful, it could go, deep into November. My first year when I was coaching at the high school with wrestling, I didn't have my football players. We were district champs in football. I didn't have any of the football players that were also wrestlers until December. So that's sort of a rarity that does happen, but typically it's over by the end of October. Also for the middle school, we're usually shooting for the end of October, but there's no postseason for the middle school. So for those of you wondering how long that goes, that's usually where it is. I will be honest, when it comes to some of the travel teams that are competing, so travel soccer, for instance, which is a big one, oftentimes slow things down for the fall season for as far as travel goes, because so many kids are expected to be at practice, 6 days a week for the team. Middle school is a little bit different. It's a little bit of a transition. There are still some club teams that are putting a lot of pressure, and I know dealing with my own children that there was lots of money involved and so on. But that's one of those things that you've got to sort of navigate for yourself. How much time does my family want to put in? Do we want to do school athletics, and do we also want to do travel? There are some people that maybe will give cross country a try. That they see themselves being a high school soccer player, but they want to give they want to give a sport, let's say like cross country, a try, and so on. So middle school sports is sometimes a time for you to try some of those things out, and to try those things out and to see what's the best suited for you. So spring break for high school sports was one of the questions. Our expectation is that the kids are there, and so there could be some consequences if you decide to go away for spring break. Whether or not you make the team, whether or not you have to sit out games when you come back, and so on. The best person to reach out to would be the head coach for that. But I know the school board has been on record to suggest if you are out for a high school sport, the expectation that you may miss some times for some vacations and so on. Now that being said, we did not have any practices this year on the Friday, the Saturday or the Sunday towards the end of our spring break. So, there are some times built in there that we don't allow practices. We very, very rarely have anything that happens on a Sunday unless, there's a extenuating circumstance. But spring break is something that families sort of, on some level may have to forego if they want to be part of the spring sports. But reach out to your coaches because they can let you know that.
Mr. Seymour, can I jump in real quick?
Absolutely, please, Dr.
Just help us with just some logistics on the backside. I'm going through and addressing all the questions that I can as we move through the presentation, Mike. If there's any that I need you to address, I will definitely put it out. I know we're pretty much on the same page. I was a little off on the middle school. I thought we ended like that first week in November, wrapping everything up. But I do recall like our last game is the end of October. At this point, like I said, I'll try to address everything in the chat so far. There is a couple that I just want to make sure that I do bring to your attention, though. At this point, the first question was around masks and whether they would wear them. It's my understanding at this point that masks during athletic events or any strenuous physical activity are not required, whether it's for PE classes or athletics. However, coaches and students on the sidelines would still be required. At this point, we would need further guidance from the CDC and the health department along those lines of whether or not masks will be required moving into next year. A great question came about with antigen testing, Mike. I just want to make sure that you and I want to be on the same page with this one. Antigen testing is available in all schools, but that's a great question of whether or not we're going to be using that for athletics going into next year. At this point, I feel confident that I think we would, but that is definitely something we need to confirm. And then the other ones, I believe, are ones I can address moving forward through this part. And if there are any coaches online from Ms. Kratzer, I think Mr. Brogan's on. If you are answering questions that are specific to the sports within the chat, I just want to say thank you for that as well. And I will continue to add on to or clarify as we go. But often with Zoom meetings, when we have chats and presentations, it's kind of like a two-person platform here. Yep. So I will do my best to coordinate with Mike and interrupt when need to. But for the most part, Mike, go ahead and keep moving, and I'll go back and hit these chats as we go. And we can always go back to the transcript at the end and follow with any parents that we need to.
Yeah, great. And Dr. Souders was spot on for everything. So right now, lots of things have changed this spring. And we are at the point now that our athletes are allowed to compete, whether it's in practice or whether it's in games, to have the masks off when they're participating. When they're on the sidelines, even in their dugouts and so on, they're supposed to have their masks on, and our coaches are supposed to have their masks on at all times. As far as the antigen testing, and I was one of the people at the high school that did the antigen testing, or performed it, and vaccines and so on, that's one of the few things we don't really know where we're going to be. And as we get information, if we get guidance from the health department, the CDC and so on, we will certainly share that with you. I would anticipate, those being some hotbed topics as we move forward for what we need to do. At this point, so some of our teams are going to postseason competitions. The guidance that we must follow is exactly what Dr. Sauter shared, and I sort of reiterated in there. So as far as the antigen testing goes, we do have the opportunity to do it. We actually also have the ability at schools now to actually test directly for COVID. So where we end up next year during this time, I don't really know yet. So, I apologize that we don't have all the information for you, but we are in a better spot than we were a year ago at this time, not really knowing, how we're going to navigate it, what it's going to look like. And, my hat's off not only to the parents, not only to the kids, but to the coaches in particular, that somehow compared to the rest of the Chestnut League, Great Valley had the fewest incidences of having to shut down programs of all the schools. And I really appreciate all the hard work of all those people did to do that. Real quick, just on this page, the Great Valley Middle School website is a great spot to go. There is a weekly bulletin that would be there. The coach should always be the first step in getting information. If for some reason you're not getting the information from the coaches, then certainly reach out to me. I know that there are a lot of people in the main office that are great sending out those school messengers when we have to cancel because of the weather. Some of the teams use a format such as Remind to get communication updates to the kids and parents, and that's an opt-in, meaning that you have to agree to do that, which is a little bit easier that way. But that goes for the middle school. And I know one of the questions was about, do you have to have experience in any of these sports before you go out? The answer is no. Unless we get to a spot where there are cuts, everybody is welcome to come out, and whether it be football or cross country or, field hockey or any of the soccer programs and so on. I would encourage your children to get out there and give it a try, even if that's something they haven't done before.
Mike, I'm going to jump in real quickly for some
Yeah.
middle school pieces on sports that have cuts or roster limitations.
Mhm.
Please know, for example, basketball is the one that would first come to my mind. That if a student, is interested in going out for basketball, and because it's just the numbers, let's say hypothetically a student does not make that team, there are other options they could jump to. That same thing would hold true, for example, in regard to fall sports. I know some students may initially want to go out for soccer. Some years we do have roster limitations on soccer. And at times, we do encourage, not at times, but we always encourage students, especially if they've never played a sport before, we will never turn anybody away, but we also have to maintain a degree of safety at times, especially for some of our contact sports. So in the event that a child is not, let's say, doesn't make the soccer team because it's, you're just, again, at a level in which it's above their playing sort of capacity or ability or aptitude point, having them shift from soccer to, say, cross country, or soccer to football, or soccer to cheerleading, anything like that, then it can occur, especially at the middle level. I'd have to defer to Mr. Seymour with regards to high school, because it could be a little bit more complicated just because of when season starts and things along those lines. But for the middle school, any student can come out at any point, and if it is a team that has a roster limitation or cut, that they could easily shift over to one that does not.
Yeah, and it's, as Dr. Sauer says, it's a little bit more complicated at the high school, but there are plenty of opportunities to switch sports if it's just not the right fit. And most of the coaches are great as long as there's not already been cuts and so on to switch to another sport. One of the questions that was in the chat that came up was, where do you get the forms for club sports specifically? I will have to defer to the people who run those club sports, because they don't have to have all the PIAA forms that the athletes need to have for what we have at school. So you would have to reach out to them and find out, and they could give you those answers and so on, because the clubs operate in a completely different way than what the other sports do. The only real difference as far as communication goes is majority of our sports at the high school have booster clubs. And if you want to get a great way to get involved within the community and get involved within a particular program, the booster club is a great way to do it. The booster clubs do operate separately from Great Valley Athletics. They're their own thing, but they do some amazing things for us and our student athletes in support of the programs. And so if you are transitioning from the middle school to the high school, if you have an 8th grader this year, that would be a great place to start, making those connections with the teams to find out, what do they do? Do they go to camps? What's the summer stuff look like? Sometimes they can provide some of that information that that you might not have. Okay. So I guess at this time I'm gonna start to wrap it up. I really appreciate your willingness to spend some time in our already busy lives to come out and get more information. Athletics for me has been a huge part of my life and my family's life, and we want to make the experience for all the kids as great as it can be. So if you ever have any thoughts or ideas of things that we could do or add or offer, we'd love to hear what you have to say. Sometimes it's a little bit more complicated than just doing it. I know one of the things that we didn't address last year because we didn't know it was going to be different was transportation. So transportation this year looked very, very different for middle school and high school athletics than it had ever looked before. Our high school athletes were allowed to transport themselves and make their own arrangements. And I'll be honest, it worked out really well. But that was, typically not something that we had done before, but it's something we needed to do to, evolve and change as trying to make this happen for everybody. And I appreciate it. I know in the chat, like a lot of our coaches, middle school and high school coaches are there, and they're the ones that are doing all the hard work. I'm just doing some of the logistical stuff behind the scenes. And we have some really, really amazing people who really are passionate about their sport, that are great with kids, that are good communicators, that, make it fun to be a part of. And, I wish I had had the opportunity to grow up in Great Valley School District and be a part of these teams and programs, because there's some great people and some great opportunities. So Dr. Satters, I don't know if there's, anything else that you would want to add? All right.
Thank you, Mike. I was just answering some chats there, so I
Yeah.
was cut off there in the last one with regard to lockers. So I will just finish my thought for whoever posed the question. I'll jump into some last thoughts.
Yeah. Please.
For lockers next year at the high school and middle school, we are basically in agreement that lockers will be utilized by our athletes next year as well as our students, especially at the middle school. But obviously the lockers and anything along these lines, even though they'll be in our plan, we're just going to need the patience and understanding of all of our parents, of our student athletes, to understand that these things do pivot very quickly. We are excited again, as I mentioned earlier, about our fall season and what it will bring from a sense of return to normalcy.
Yeah.
Yet in the same light, there's still some variables that we're unaware of how they will play out. But at this point, I believe, and Mike, please correct me if I'm wrong, we're really looking towards next year's fall, winter, and spring being that of full seasons, back to normal, 5 days a week with competitions, no pods, no masks when playing, no oxygen deprivation.
Yep.
If you believe that is something that's occurring. But the bottom line is we want to try to get back to what we believe is in the best interest of kids, while keeping in mind the importance of keeping everyone safe, whether it's COVID, whether it's concussion protocols, anything along those lines. Safety is a priority. And once we have those details ironed out, I am confident that between Mr. Seymour, Dr. Capitola, and myself, we will have communications that are coming out for both the high school and middle school in the near future. Mike, just to close out, I want to thank again every parent that is here to see. At one point, I think we had close to 115 registered participants at any given time. And that, again, I think is a testament to our desire to get back to normal, but I think it also is reflective of just our commitment to our athletic programs. I want to tip my hat to all the coaches, especially our head coaches at the high school who run the programs, whether it's football, basketball, soccer, field hockey, lacrosse, golf. Again, I know tennis, I'll probably miss a couple in here, but the bottom line is they really do the majority of the work of getting kids excited, setting, the training schedules, making sure that plays and things like that are all consistent from high school down. Again, I believe that the philosophy that we started many years ago between the middle school and high school to have a program that is consistent and builds so that our high school athletes are on a competitive level, regardless of who they're facing in the Chestnut and even at the regional and state levels, regardless of sport, is in play. And we are well prepared to go far into the postseason in all of our sports. Again, parents, I want to thank you for your ongoing commitment of our student athletes. And again, while the athletic program is extremely important, please keep in mind that they must be academically focused as well, because without the academic side, the athletic side will not happen. So with that, I want to thank Mr. Seymour, everyone who's joined us from parents, coaches, to this evening, and just want to say thank you. So Mike, back to you. I appreciate it. And I believe I hit everything in the chat, but I'm going to double check just to make sure.
Yep. One last one that came in. That's a good one. I would plan, if you're a high school athlete, I would make sure you have all your forms submitted on Form Relief, everything ready to go for that first day of practice. If it's the middle school, I'd be ready for that first day of school. And we will try to get information out, as best we can. Please do not hesitate. I work all summer. Send me an email if you want information, if you want, more specifics for your specific sport. Reach out to the coach, and make sure that you get that information.
Yeah, and the last question that just came in, and it was from the Ackers, who I know have two twins that are coming up in the 9th grade.
Yeah.
I believe swimming. Are we still over at Immaculata or Upper Main Line? Where are we heading next year, Mike? Do you have that defined yet?
It's a great question. Our anticipation is to be back at Immaculata. We have a great partnership with them. They were not allowing anybody on their campus that was not a student or a faculty member. So that's why we had to scramble and try to get at least a little bit of pool time at the Upper Main Line Y. We were lucky because the person who runs the Upper Main Line Y happened to be a Great Valley person, because they had turned a lot of other schools away. So, our anticipation for swimming, just as Dr. Satters alluded to, is to be back 5 days a week, if not 6 days a week, over to Immaculata, competing and doing everything like we've done in the past. So for a sport like swimming, there is a shuttle bus that goes from the high school to Immaculata each day for practice. And so the kids will get picked up directly at Immaculata, not back at Great Valley High School. All right. All right. Well, again, don't be strangers, please. If I see you out at one of the sporting events, come up and introduce yourself. And if you have any questions, please feel free to send them my way. I'll be happy to answer them for you. All right. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Take care.
Take care, everyone. Have a great evening. Thank you, Michael.